Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of Lola Speaks. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been rocking with me for a while now, welcome back because y'all like family to me now. And I love y'all. So last week, we talked about loving our friends without losing ourselves. We talked about creating healthy boundaries. We talked about expectations, about giving our friends permission just to be human, permission to have bad days, to say no, permission to not always have the emotional capacity to pour into us because healthy friendships aren't built on obligation. They're built on honesty, grace, communication, and mutual respect. But after I finished recording that episode, I immediately went into thinking about what does it feel like to lose a friend? The turmoil we go through when we lose a friend, like what happens when you've done your best to love someone very well and you lose that friendship anyway? What happens when there wasn't one huge betrayal, no screaming matches, no dramatic endings, just silence, different lives, different priorities, different directions, because if you've ever lost someone who felt like family, that's a different kind of pain. Like, and today, that's exactly what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what it feels like and how do you cope with it in that grieving period. And not because I have all the answers, but because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to lose a friendship because there was a time in my life where I lost someone I genuinely believed would be in my life forever. She was just not just a friend. She felt like my sister. She knew versions of me that a lot of people never will. She knew my dreams before they happened. She knew my struggles before I ever talked about them publicly. She knew my family. She knew my heart. And we laughed together. We cried together. We celebrated together. We celebrated each other's wins. We celebrated each other's lives. We were there through different chapters of each other's lives. And somewhere along the way, life happened, right? Our paths just changed. Our priorities changed. Our lives started moving in completely different directions. And if I'm being honest, for a long time, I wrestled with that because nobody prepares you for losing a friendship that once felt like home. Nobody prepares you for that. But you know what's interesting? When you go through a breakup with someone you're dating, people check on you. They ask if you're okay. They tell you you're going to be fine. You're going to find somebody else. When someone passes away, people understand your grief. They bring flowers. They send cards. They sit with you. But when you lose a friend, it's different. People don't really know what to say. Sometimes they don't even realize you're grieving because on the outside, life keeps moving. You still go to work, you still smile, you still post on social media, but inside, deep down inside, you're mourning someone who's still alive. And I really don't think people talk about that, about how confusing that feels. Because how do you grieve someone who still exists? Someone you could probably call, but you don't. Someone whose birthday you still remember. Someone who still crosses your mind when something funny happens. Like someone you still instinctively want to tell good news to. Until you remember, your lives don't look like that anymore. And that's what you call grief, real grief. I think we've minimized that for too long. For a long time, I thought something was wrong with me because I missed her. Months would pass and I'd hear a song or I'd remember something that I remember something that made us both laugh, or I've seen something that reminded me of both of us. And for a second, I'd smile and then I'd realize we don't share moments like this anymore. And I used to think, like, why am I still thinking about this? Or should I be over it? Shouldn't I be kind of over this by now? But one thing that healing has taught me is that missing someone doesn't always mean you're meant to reconnect with them. Sometimes it simply means that they mattered in your life. I think we've been taught that if you're healed, you'll never think about them again, or you'll never miss that person again, or you'll never wonder how they're doing. And I don't believe that that's true. I think healing is much quieter than that. I think that healing is remembering without falling apart. I think it's smiling at the memories that you've created over the years instead of breaking down because of it. Like Healing is being grateful that someone was a part of your life, even if they aren't a part of your life anymore. One of the hardest things I think I had to accept was that two good people can simply end up on different roads, two totally different paths, two totally different spectrums. And that doesn't automatically make either person wrong. I think that sometimes we want someone to blame because it helps us make sense of the ending. But life isn't always that simple, right? Sometimes there isn't a villain. Sometimes life starts asking different things of us. And sometimes one person grows in one direction and another grows in another direction. Sometimes what once connected you is no longer enough to sustain where you're both headed. And sometimes that's painful, but it's also beautiful at the same time, especially if you can honor that respectfully. And because we want to believe that love is enough to keep every relationship together, but love doesn't mean permanence, right? Sometimes it simply means I always appreciate what we share. There was a season where I kept asking God questions like, why? And we all have those seasons. We all have those moments where we want to know, why did this friendship have to end? Why couldn't we work it out? Why did someone I love so much become someone I barely speak to? And for a long time, I wanted answers. I wanted something that made it make sense. But healing didn't come when I got an explanation. It doesn't come like that. Healing came when I actually accepted that every chapter of my life was meant to last. Wasn't. Every chapter of my life wasn't meant to last forever. Sometimes God allows people to walk beside us because they have something we need in that season. Sometimes it's encouragement, it's accountability, laughter, maybe. Sometimes it's simply companionship while we're becoming who we're called to be. And then life changes, not because someone was wrong or because someone was bad in the friendship, but because our paths began asking different things of us. I used to think every ending meant something had gone terribly wrong. But now I think some endings simply mean we've reached the end of that chapter. And as painful as that can be, there's peace in accepting that God knows where every road is leading, even when I don't. That doesn't mean I stop loving her. That doesn't mean I don't miss her. There are still moments when something happens and I think, I wish I could tell her. I wish I could call her. I wish I could, share this moment with her. There are still moments, when I laugh so hard and immediately think about conversations that we used to have. Missing someone doesn't mean you're stuck. It means they mattered. And I don't think there's anything wrong with admitting that. Nobody prepares you for the version of yourself that exists after losing someone you trusted. Because I don't think losing a good friend just changes your relationships. I think it changes you. At least it changed me. I know it changed me for a fact. I became more careful, not in a bad way, but just careful. I started thinking twice before opening up. I stopped assuming every friendship would last forever. Stopped sharing certain parts of myself so quickly. Because once you've experienced the heartbreak of losing someone who felt like family, your heart starts trying to protect itself. And honestly, I don't think I even realized I was doing that. I thought I was just growing up. I thought I was becoming wiser. But if I'm completely transparent, some of it wasn't wisdom. Some of it was fear. Fear dressed up as discernment. Fear whispering, don't get too attached, don't tell them everything. Don't tell them all your business. Keep some distance between you and this person. Like, don't let anybody become that important again. Because your heart remembers what it felt like to lose someone who mattered to you. And naturally, it doesn't want to experience that kind of pain twice, not even twice. Oh, and maybe you guys have felt that too. I know somebody in here has felt that too. Maybe you've met someone, some really incredible people, but every time they get close, you pull back just a little bit, right? Not because they've done anything wrong, because someone else did. You start waiting for disappointments before they even give you a reason to not trust them. You start expecting the friendship to end before it really had a chance to even begin. And that's what grief can do if we're not careful. It doesn't just make us miss people. Sometimes it makes us mistreat people. I realized something one day that really challenged me. I was comparing every new friendship to the one that I had lost. without even realizing it. I'd catch myself thinking, like, she would have understood this. Like, if I say something like that, my girl would have understood this, or she would have known exactly what to say to me in this very moment. She would have laughed about this thing, or something of those things. I always think that. And while those thoughts are very innocent, they weren't fair because I was measuring new people against old memories. And how could anyone compete with years of history? They just simply can't. How could someone I've known 6 months compete with someone I've known for years? They can't. And they shouldn't have to. Because every friendship deserves the opportunity to become what it's meant to become, not what the last friendship used to be. And that realization changed me because I wasn't giving new people a chance. I was asking them to replace someone who they couldn't replace because that person can't be replaced. But the truth is, people aren't replacements. They're different gifts, different personalities, different conversations, different memories waiting to be created. Healing doesn't ask you to erase the people you loved. It asks you to stop expecting new people to become them. And that's impossible. And honestly, it's unfair because every meaningful friendship is unique. Nobody will laugh exactly the way they laughed. Nobody will tell stories exactly the way that they did. Nobody will understand certain memories the way they did. And that's okay. The goal isn't to recreate the past. The goal is to stay open enough to experience something beautiful again. I also had to forgive myself because for a long time I wondered if there was something I could have done differently. Like maybe I should have called more. Maybe I should have spoke up a little sooner. Or maybe I should have fought a little harder. Maybe all the maybes that run through your mind, right? Isn't it amazing how our minds do that? How we replay old conversations looking for different endings, how we rewrite scenarios hoping they'll somehow change the reality of the situation. But eventually I realized you can't heal while constantly negotiating with the past. And at some point, you have to accept that yesterday cannot be edited. It can only be learned from. And there was so much freedom in finally putting down the what ifs. Like today, if someone was to ask me how I feel about that friendship, I'd probably smile before I answered. Not because it didn't hurt and not because I don't miss her sometimes, but because gratitude finally became louder than grief. I stopped asking God to bring that friendship back. Instead, I thank Him for letting our paths cross in the first place. Because whether she realizes it or not, she helped shape the woman I became. She was a part of my story, and nobody can ever take that away. Some chapters are short, some are very long, but every chapter absolutely matters. And if I'm completely honest, there are still days when I think about her. Not with anger, though, and not with resentment, just love. The kind of love that says, I genuinely hope you're doing well. I hope life has been kind to you. I hope you're becoming everything that you prayed for. And I think that's one of the most beautiful places healing can take you. When you no longer need someone to be a part of your life, to genuinely wish them well. That's peace. Not pretending the friendship never mattered, not pretending that you don't miss them. Just accepting that love doesn't always have to look like access. Sometimes love looks like letting go with grace. I don't think enough people talk about what happens after you finally make peace with the ending. Because one day you wake up and you realize you haven't cried about it in a while. You haven't replayed that last conversation. You haven't spent hours wondering what you could have done differently. And for a second, you almost feel guilty because somehow we convince ourselves that if we stop hurting, it means we stop loving. But that's not true. Healing doesn't erase love. Healing changes the weight of it. Love becomes lighter. It stops feeling like an open wound and starts feeling like a beautiful memory. I used to think making peace meant forgetting. Now I know peace has nothing to do with forgetting. Peace is remembering without resentment. Peace is remembering without needing answers. Peace is remembering without wishing life was different. Because the truth is, if I could go back, I don't know that I'd change anything. And not because it didn't hurt because losing a friendship definitely hurts. But because every friendship I've had has shaped me into the woman that I am today. Every conversation, every road trip, every birthday, every laugh until we couldn't breathe, every disagreement, every lesson, every goodbye, it all became a part of my story. And I don't want to erase the chapters just because they ended. I think one of the biggest misconceptions we have is believing that every meaningful relationship is supposed to last forever. But if but what if that's not the answer? But what if that's not the measure of a beautiful friendship? What if the measure isn't how long it lasted, but how deeply it changed you? There are people who spend 20 years together and never truly know one another. And then there are friendships that only last a few years, yet leave fingerprints on your heart forever. So maybe we have to stop measuring relationships by their length and start appreciating them for their impact. Like one thing that I had to stop doing was comparing my current life to the life I imagined that we'd have together, because sometimes that's what we're actually grieving. We're not grieving today's reality, we're grieving tomorrow's plans, the vacations we talked about, watching each other's children grow up, growing old together, being aunties to one another's kids, showing up at birthdays, calling each other after work, doing life together, right? But sometimes the hardest thing to let go of isn't the person, it's the future that you imagined with them. And that's a different kind of grief because you're not just mourning memories, you're mourning possibilities. But here's what God showed me. And I know my big GOT gonna always show me something. He showed me that just because a dream changes doesn't mean your life becomes less beautiful. It just becomes different. And different doesn't always mean worse. Sometimes different is exactly where your next blessing lives. Sometimes different introduces you to people you never would have met if you kept trying to hold on to an old chapter. Sometimes different teaches you parts of yourself that comfort never could. I don't think God wastes relationships. I think He uses every single one of them, even the ones that end, especially the ones that end, because endings have a way of revealing what we learned while we were there. And here's something I really want to say to the person listening who's still grieving. Like, please don't punish the new people that come into your life for what that old pain taught you. I know it's kind of scary. I know opening your heart again feels risky. I know trusting it again feels almost impossible. But don't make someone earn an apology for something they never did. Don't make someone spend years proving they're different from the person who left. Give people room to become who they actually are, not who your fear expects them to be. Because every beautiful friendship starts with a decision, the decision to believe that good people still exist. And I've also realized something else, that making new friends doesn't mean you're replacing old ones. Nobody can replace someone who helped shape your life. It's simply impossible. You don't replace people, you make room, right? Room for new laughter. You make room for new memories. You make room for new traditions. You make room for new conversations. Your heart was never created to only love once. It has an incredible capacity to honor yesterday while embracing today. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that God gives us, the ability to love again without forgetting what we've already loved. If I could say one thing to the friend that I lost or to the friend that's no longer a friend, I think I would simply think it would simply be thank you. Thank you for being exactly who you were supposed to be during the season that we shared. Thank you for every laugh, for every conversation, every memory. Thank you for seeing parts of me that were still growing. Thank you for loving me during that chapter of our life. I genuinely hope you're happy. Seriously, I genuinely hope you're healthy. I genuinely hope you're living the life you prayed for. And I hope one day you think about me and you too smile. Because despite how our story ended, I'm still grateful we had one. And even though our stories are no longer running side by side, they'll always share a chapter, and that's enough. I don't need our past to cross to honor what once was. I'll always be grateful for a season we got to walk together. So today, today, if you're grieving friendship, I don't want you to rush yourself. I don't want you to convince yourself that you have to stop caring. I don't want you to pretend that they never mattered because they did. Instead, allow yourself to be grateful. Grateful that your paths crossed, grateful that you experienced that kind of connection. Grateful for the lesson, grateful for the growth. Grateful that someone once loved you enough to become family, even if only for a season. And as you continue moving forward, don't become hard. Don't become cynical. Don't stop believing in beautiful friendships because one painful goodbye doesn't mean you'll never experience another meaningful hello. Just because someone isn't in your life any longer doesn't mean they weren't one of God's greatest gifts that God ever gave you. So, in today's closing, I'm going to leave you guys with this. Losing a good friend isn't something you just get over, you adjust to it. An adjustment takes time. It takes time to stop reaching for your phone to call them. It takes time to stop thinking, I can't wait to tell her this, before remembering your life looks different now. It takes time to create new routines, new memories, new traditions. It takes time to accept that someone who once played such a significant role in your life is no longer a part of your everyday story. And if you're struggling with that, please give yourself some grace because adjusting to the absence of someone you deeply loved is not easy. Some days a memory will catch you completely off guard. Some days you'll hear a song, drive past a place, see an old picture, memories pop up on your Facebook, your Instagram all the time, Snapchat, and for a moment you'll feel the weight of what once was. And that doesn't mean you've gone backwards. That doesn't mean you aren't healed. It simply means you love that person deeply. And I hope you never apologize for that because loving people deeply is never the mistake. As hard as it is to lose someone who felt like family, I still believe it was worth loving them. I still believe it was worth sharing life with them. I still believe they were one of God's greatest gifts to me for the season we shared. Some people will always hold a special place in our hearts. They just won't always hold the same place in our lives. And that's okay because love doesn't always ask us to hold on. Sometimes love asks us to be thankful. Thankful that for one chapter of our lives, our stories found each other. So if you're grieving today, take your time, adjust at your own pace. Give yourself permission to miss them without believing you have to go back. Give yourself permission to love them from a distance. And most importantly, give yourself permission to believe that your heart is still capable of building beautiful friendships again. Because one goodbye doesn't mean cancel every hello that's still waiting for you. I want to say one more thing. It's important not to revisit friendships that end with disrespect. It's important to know your worth within a friendship as well. If a friendship ends disrespectfully, please know that you've done what you needed to do in that relationship, in that friendship, and walk away and know that you do not have to revisit that situation out of pity or because you're still searching for answers. They can't give you the answer if they ended that relationship disrespectfully. We also need to know our self worth within friendships as well as relationships. Because when you're a giving person and you're a loving, caring, kind, godly person, and someone treats you so wrong, you don't have to spare them with always trying to be there or compensate for something that you feel like you've lost. Thank you for sitting with me today. If this episode found you where you are, send it to someone who's quietly carrying this kind of grief. Remind them that they aren't strange for missing someone, that they aren't weak for grieving, and that they aren't alone. Until next time, I love y'all. Peace.